Hey there, we're the Westlot Pirates and welcome to the show. We're here to share thoughts on Northwestern athletics and college sports with thoughts and analysis from the visceral to the statistical. We run our tailgate with the red pirate flag flying high above as we give no quarter, especially the fourth. I'm Sam Walter.
I'm John Lacombe.
And I'm Eric Skoskowspo.
A couple things to mention off the top. Those of you who tuned in to our live first round NFL draft pod with Gary and Chris, congratulations for getting through it. I unhinged as always. It was a really, really good time. That is up on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, we are now streaming on YouTube. So look for us. If you're looking on YouTube, search for Westlot Pirates. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button and like and share and do all those crazy things that'll help spread the word on YouTube. So we're real excited to be live on YouTube for the Westlot Pirates. So that's very, very cool. And we got some fun stuff planned for this weekend. John, tell us all about what's going on.
Yeah, we're so excited. Brad May, Northwestern alumnus, has really spearheaded this effort to organize the Women's Non-Revenue Sports Weekend this Sunday. Really, it goes all weekend, and it's an effort to have gatherings of people to celebrate these unbelievable women's sports that we've been so blessed to have at this university, with the event and kind of the weekend culminating on this unbelievable Saturday that we have ahead of us here, May 4th, with women's softball playing Indiana, softball playing Indiana at 1 p.m., and then the Big Ten women's lacrosse tournament final out on the lake at 4:30 p.m., which, furiously knocking wood, again, features the Northwestern Wildcats. And at the front end of that day, Brad May, and we have been working hard to help him do it, are organizing a Westlot tailgate of the in the Westlot of Ryan Field beginning at 9 a.m. We have been beating the drum for this for weeks now, and we are really excited to get an authentic football-grade fall tailgate in the Westlot of Ryan Field in the middle of the spring. It's something we've always wanted to do. You all have always wanted it. We've all wanted to do this, especially as our women's sports teams have been so good in the spring. And we're finally making it happen. So we will be running the typical Westlot Pirates tailgate. In the Westlot, we will have the pirate flag flying high. And we'll be making, I think, the menu is going to be the same as what it was for this past fall, which is pulled pork sandwiches on the menu. Sam may be trucking in some brisket, word tell of brisket on the menu.
I think that could possibly be arranged. Yeah,
that could possibly be arranged. And Brad has a whole suite of food, and there are a bunch of other people coming too. I mean, it's a tailgate. We've talked to so many people who are excited about it and going to be coming in. We've heard from a bunch of former Northwestern athletes across multiple sports. We'll be talking to one of them in a little bit who's really excited about what's going to be going on in the Westlot Saturday morning. So it starts at 9 a.m. Come on out. Bring some food, bring some tailgate stuff if you want to. Otherwise, just bring yourself. Show up, and we're going to have a great time, and then we're going to watch potentially two fantastic sporting events.
John, you alluded to a special guest coming up. We are real excited to welcome back Sydney Supple to the show. She's been just everywhere when it comes to softball this past year. We had her on last year. She was just getting ready to embark on her journey into the world of sports media, and very much looking forward to sitting down with her and catching up. So without any further ado, let's go to her now. If you or a loved one is seriously injured by someone else's negligence, hire Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade prosecuting murder cases in Chicago, Simpson opened his own firm focused on wrongful death and personal injury cases. He specializes in car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and other transportation accidents, as well as construction accidents, medical negligence, slip and falls, product liability, and more. Millions recovered for clients. No fee unless he wins. The Simpson Law Group. Compassion, empathy, and vigorous advocacy. Go to simpsonlawgroup.com or call 312-332-2107 for a free consultation. And go Cats. Well, we are thrilled to welcome back to the show Sydney Supple. Very, very excited to have you on. I was going to read down all of the different things, all of your different titles and all the different things you've been up to. But that list is so long, we'd be here all night. Hi, thanks for jumping back on with us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you guys for having me. As always, I love following your stuff. Super excited when you asked.
It's so funny. I don't feel like we want to just like give you a bunch of laurels just to give you a bunch of laurels. And maybe we are biased because we're in the Northwestern community. But if you would have asked me 1 year ago, pick a person who is at the dead center of the softball world right now, I wouldn't have had a name for you. Now that name would be Sydney Supple. I feel like if there's an epicenter of softball right now, you are at that center. Can you walk us through what has your last year been like, and how did you end up at this place that you're at right now?
Well, thank you, first of all, for all the kind words. It's been such a whirlwind, and coming back to the J, which will now be senior weekend, I cannot believe it's been a year since it was my senior weekend, and to think everything that's happened in the last 12 months. But I feel super grateful. And for me, when I made the decision to kind of throw myself into the journalism career for my master's program, the coolest part about it all is I was going back and forth between playing my 5th year and covering it. And it was the hardest decision of my life. And I think what gave me permission is when I was sitting on the couch with Kate Joran at her house, and she said, "Sydney, this is the gift that the game is giving you." And first of all, she always knows the right things to say in the right moments. And that was exactly what I needed to hear. And it's amazing how much I didn't understand it then, but it's came into fruition now. And I feel so grateful to be able to be a part of softball in such a special, unique, and different way than when I was playing, but still means so much to me. And I think if anything, I thought I loved the game playing, and I did with my whole heart. And I love it even more now. And where my journey really started is when I went out to Syracuse to go into Newhouse. I'm getting my master's in broadcast and digital journalism. I reached out to Tara Henry, who now runs Softball America. At the time, she was just leaving D1 softball and kind of in the midst of that switch. And I always really loved her coverage. And I always just really enjoyed following her throughout my career, and introduced myself and basically said, "Look, I don't know how I want to do it, but I just know I want to grow the game." And she was on board with that. And from there, it's kind of been a lot of just testing things out. And she's given me so much creativity and the full freedom to do so, which I'm so thankful for. And the entire softball world has just wrapped their arms around me. And I've had the opportunity to go to so many different campuses. I think I've slept in my apartment 2 weekends of 2024.
Wow.
I have more airplane points than I know what to do with at the moment. But it was actually funny. As I was on my way back to the Midwest yesterday, the flight attendant was like, "Sydney, nice to see you again." And I was like, "This is a problem." This is not a great sign. But I mean, I've gotten able to go to North Carolina, West Point, and it's just been amazing to cover Syracuse, talk to Virginia Tech, talk to Clemson, Florida State. And I was so fortunate, like you all know, to get to know so many people in the Big Ten. And I still think it's like the most special conference in the world. But I have just been amazed at the storylines and the women and the coaches that I have gotten to learn outside of the Big Ten, in the ACC, in the SEC. And even outside of that, there's just so many special people. And I think it's just reiterated to me that softball is the greatest thing ever, because the people in it are just so special. So from being able to cover it with Softball America to then calling games as a softball analyst for ACC and Big Ten, this will be my 9th weekend in a row of doing games. I just feel so incredibly blessed with the opportunity.
Are you calling the games this weekend as well?
I have Saturday's game for Alumni Day.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool.
That is really awesome. So Sydney, last time we had you on, you had just launched your podcast for the players, I believe, or yes. And you had a couple episodes under your belt where that was in advance of last year's Northwestern softball season. So we're roughly, 16 months into the future. You're still doing that podcast in addition to all the other journalism that you just described. And I'm curious how you've fit those two things together as you've embarked on this wild travel schedule and calling games and engaging with, folks across all these different conferences and finding yourself in the center of that softball maelstrom, as John put it earlier.
For my podcast, and then I also, in addition, with the start of this season, picked up Softball America. I run our Big Ten softball podcast, where each week I interview a different Big Ten player. Between both of those, I feel like it's just equipped me so much in being a softball analyst and calling games on the weekend, because most of the time when I'm coming into these games, I've either talked with the player on one of the sides in a really personal and in-depth way. And to me, that's really important. And I'm doing so many of those interviews that are never seeing the light of day on my podcast, just with these teams and these players to prep for the series, because I think being a former athlete, so often we're just talking about the stat line. Like I could tell you who's the top hitters at Indiana. I could tell you who's the top hitters on Northwestern, but I want to know the stories. And I think that's why people have enjoyed listening to me call games. And I always say my two goals are, when you listen to a broadcast, you learn something about the game that you didn't know, and you learn something about one of the players that you didn't know. And these podcasts have allowed me to really be able to peel back layers and build up a lot of trust with players across the country, and just to give them a platform to share their stories, because there's been some incredibly amazing stories. In this past week, today I interviewed Kiki Thull from Michigan, who is leading the team with 14 home runs. And she tells me how for an entire year, everyone she knew said, "I don't think you're good enough to go Division I." And that was her sophomore year of high school. Like, absolutely absurd. And Virginia Tech, I had somebody on my podcast earlier this week. She also was the first varsity female football player in the state of Virginia. So there's just endless of stories throughout our sport. And I'm just really fortunate. Both podcasts have given me the platform to talk about them.
I was going to say, especially with your podcast, from the players, I've been just really struck by the way you don't go into the X's and O's, and you really, it's really a chance to get to know all the different players, and the way that you're connecting with these women from around the country is so special. And I want to congratulate you on that, because being able to have that connection and to make the listener feel like we're getting to know not only the players but you as well is really special. So congratulations.
It's funny. I really appreciate that. Someone told me this week that said, "You're very good at making people cry." And
we were just about to go here.
And I was like, if I didn't know what you meant, I would be so offended and be like, "Wow, am I a terrible person?" But I'm glad people feel comfortable enough to share their emotions with me, because I've cried on the podcast. I've had a lot of athletes, so it's really a safe, special place.
That was, I think, part of the reason we were talking about the fact that it really seems like you're at the epicenter of this softball world, is for anyone who's kind of on the outside here, and obviously we would include ourselves in this group, who are not super duper softball experts. You might have a knee jerk to be like, "Oh, Sydney Supple is doing an interview series with a bunch of softball players. Well, this is a space she's sliding into that has been formerly occupied by this person, this person, this person." No. Sydney is doing all these interviews with the top players, and you realize that this is something that should have always existed in exactly this way that hasn't. And the key thing that tips us all off to that is the emotion that we see from the players. I mean, we'll get to the Northwestern specific just discussion in a little bit, but I mean, you had Angela Zedak on, and you had her. you got her. We were joking. You last danced her. You handed her the iPad. It's the clutch move. But I mean, if there's a single, obviously, player who would drive this point home more than anybody else, it's because in a reunion of sorts, quote unquote, you had maybe the greatest softball player of all time on your for Softball America pod, Jocelyn Allo. And watching her get so emotional talking about growing the game, I think we all sat here and we were just saying, look at this. Look at the platform. You would think that someone like Jocelyn Allo is giving. No, Sydney Supple is creating this platform that should have always existed that exists now, and you can see it. I mean, it must feel special to you to be able to have that connection with someone of the kind of stature that Ala has.
That interview meant the world to me because of everything you said. The way that Jocelyn Allo has grown our game, I cannot commend her enough. And now she's creating a space in the professional league to be able to play both that really could be the future and evolve for so many of women's sports within the game. But I had to sit and really reflect after that interview because that one meant so much to me, and just sharing the field with her, understanding how great she was. And it was kind of crazy how it came into fruition because we had known that day that Supple America, we were going to be one of the people to be able to kind of release that she was entering both women's professional leagues. And we were really excited for that. And it wasn't till like the final hour that I basically was like, would she be willing to do an interview? And I was in class when I got the okay text that we were going to be doing in 2 hours. My class ended like 90 minutes. So I had about 30 minutes to prep. And I was so stressed because it's Jocelyn Allo. You want it to be perfect. You want to memorize it. And then it kind of dawned on me being like, I don't need to read off her stats. Everybody knows how great she is. I just want to talk to her for who she is. And I think that allowed me to be in a really special place with her and really listen to what she was saying, and then be able to ask questions off of that originally that got us to the root of why she's doing this, about why she's such a trailblazer, because she loves the game. It's such a raw, authentic, beautiful way. And I was just really grateful how that was able to be showcased throughout the interview.
I got to ask, you had to have left on the cutting floor going over how you struck her out in the World Series, right?
No, never. Oh my goodness. It's so funny how that one always makes me laugh when people bring it up, because I think walking the streets, you would have thought I was the most famous person that night, even after we lost, being like, are you the pitcher? Which is amazing because you have to be so good for everyone to be able to react that way to one strikeout. And that's why she was one of the very best in our game.
Sydney, I'm curious, like obviously you've manifested this incredible platform and connection with players, et cetera. I love the storytelling piece. It's such a critical thing that even in, mundane grocery analytics, it's all about storytelling. Like that, this is the thing that brings people together and connects them, et cetera. And I love that, that's the primary theme of how you bring these players in and talk to them. But where do you go from here? Like what is, I want to ask, like, who's on your wish list to pull into your orbit as you continue to talk about, to continue to share stories and engage with those. But I think the bigger question is you clearly have this desire, and so many of your fellow, recent players, et cetera, share it, to grow the game. How are you going to do that next, I guess is the question. And what do you think the most important things for softball in the coming months and years are to help the game get as big as it possibly can?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I think I'm always coming up with new ideas every day and ways that I think we can get there. And I think the biggest thing is we just need everyone to talk about the game. We need everyone to tune in. We need everyone to hear these player stories. And for me, when I look at small picture, and I'm really excited, we are going to be announcing with Supple America that I will be hosting a live selection show of my reactions along with Nicole Mendez, All-American at Oklahoma. And we will be bringing in different athletes and players within every regional when they're picked. So it's like, I look at that, and then I look at the plans that I have for when I do go to regionals, super regionals, the Women's College World Series. I just want to be creating all this behind the scenes content where people who are falling in love with our game every single year, because once you tune in once, people get hooked. Then they're able to see a platform where can I learn more about this woman or this coach? And for me, I just want to be able to continue that, not only through the season, but I think there's such a room for growth. And I'm excited for this fall to hopefully really be able to dive deep into how I picture it. When you ask me my dream, I picture it when you turn on the TV and you see football college game day. How can we get that into softball? because I want to tell these stories of these communities, these campuses, these programs. And that would be my dream. And that's what I'm working at within this off season and then going into season.
Oh man. I mean, it's like we couldn't have more belief in your ability to pull this off. I think we're all so excited to just see how you're going to execute this. I guess in the interest of maybe making a Northwestern pivot, obviously we mentioned the Angela Zedak interview earlier, and Sydney Spin, Kansas Robinson, you had her on also. We've used the word, I think online and on the pod, incandescent with her. She's just a star. And I think we want to talk about her, but just the team in general. I think this is the period now where I think with such a big weekend coming up and obviously the postseason beyond and everything, Northwestern Nation, more so than, at any point up to this point in the year, is getting locked in on NU softball right now. And you know more than anyone about Northwestern. And like, what's your take on this team? What do you think about the character of this team as opposed to last year or the year before? What do you think sets this team apart? What do you think are its strengths?
First off, I think this team is so special. And one of the biggest reasons why I think is because it's such a different DNA than what you saw the last 2 years. There was a group of us that had played together 4 or 5 years, and everyone you knew what you were going to get. You knew the type of team we were. We were loud, we were passionate, we were going to play till the wheels fell off. And then you get this group of women who I've just had the privilege of getting to know so many of the underclassmen so well, and their heart is so pure. And I think that was the first thing I realized is how much they love this game and how much every single one of them showed up, even in the fall, 6 a.m. weights, and just felt so grateful to be wearing Northwestern across their chest. And I think in that moment was when I realized that there was something special here, and nobody in the country had seen it yet, truthfully. And they knew that. Part of their narrative was everybody is writing us off. You get rid of 7 starting players. It's a complete 180 in terms of the team dynamic. And there were so many growing pains. But I think what really made the spark happen is when they realized they didn't have to be last year's teams. They could be their own team. And when they were able to find that, really, I think coming into conference play, you have just seen this confidence take over. You've seen veterans step up in roles they've always filled, but in a bigger way. But I think more than anything, you've seen Emma Ray, you've seen Riley on the mound, you've seen Ayana. I'm talking people who've never started before just absolutely blossom. And really, I credit it to them enough for just having this belief in themselves and their just willingness to do anything for Northwestern on the front of their jersey. And I think that's what's so special. And I think there's a group of women who don't care what anybody else thinks of them. They don't care the fact that they just cracked the top 25 for NCAA. They just continue to bet on themselves, and they're going to continue to do it until people start to catch on what you're seeing now.
Do you think there's anything special about, I don't know, we were talking about, when the group of the super seniors stayed for the extra year, and now I think, I guess part of what put this in my mind is Northwestern softball just put up an interview today with Coach Drohan talking about Hannah Katie. And I think maybe Northwestern fans almost forget just how dead center Hannah Katie's been for massive moments, particularly the Arizona, the Tempe, the super regional. And all of those moments right up and down to catching the final out that sent you guys to the Women's College World Series. And between Angela Zedak, I'm wondering, do you think that there's a certain special thing about that connective tissue between the key players who were the part of this group who just came before, and then these young players kind of helping carry, I guess, one dynasty into another, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. I think you're 100% right there. And I would even expand it past Hannah Katie, Angela Zedak, who I think have done a tremendous job just elevating their games in so many ways and elevating their leadership. But I think it also really comes down to you have so many people in the bench who are now getting opportunities, whether it's, DP or pinch hitter or coming in for innings, who were in the dugout of the Women's College World Series or or in the dugout at Alabama, and you can't teach those lessons until you are there living the moment. You understand that the dedication that it takes all the way back in September to be able to stand in those moments in June. You understand the belief it takes. You understand how to be able to challenge so many different obstacles that are going to come your way. And that's what these players really understand, whether they were the ones starting or not. I think Ayanna Lindsay is somebody who I go back to time and time again because I watched her work in silence every single day at practice, where she might not have been getting the opportunities for the whole world to see it on game day, but the way she came in early, stayed in late, was the one player you always knew was carrying the buckets most of the time, two of them. She was just somebody who kept her head down and was the greatest teammate in the world and was slowly just prepping and building on her game. So when it was her moment to shine, now she's making SportsCenter top 10 plays. And I think that's the beauty in this team, is that no one was self-centered in those moments. They were so aware it was going around them, and they were just sponges. And now when it's their opportunity to shine, it's the most beautiful thing to see.
I'm super intrigued about Kate and Carol and the coaching staff, right? Because they have had, sustained success at Northwestern, but this is probably the first example I can think of where you have had the roster turnover and they've been able to sustain the success, immediately on the back of the prior dynasty, if you will. And I'm curious if they brought anything different into this year, to all the points you're talking about the players, and not to take anything away from the women on the team, certainly, but is there anything in their approach that has changed that they've learned from past experiences?
Every single one of us, I can speak collectively on behalf of current and former players, that we are only the players and the women we are today because of Kate and Carol. At the end of the day, it's a trickle-down effect in terms of building a championship team. And without them at the helm, Michelle, Tony, so many other people, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think this year, the biggest year, Kate and Carol and Tony and Michelle, everybody have just taught so much. And I think that's the biggest thing when I talk to Kate about practices, is because we came from such a very veteran team, we were always just practicing kind of more of the physical things, ways we could enhance things. But they have just sat down with so many players and with the team for hours on end. And sometimes that was their practice of just teaching the younger players, this is what we do. This is Northwestern softball. This is how you run out a play, even though it's a pop-up. This is how you be good to the game, because that's Kate's number one thing. And as crazy as it sounds, I fully believe in it. Kate Drohan teaches you how to not cut corners on anything in life. We joke about it all the time as alumni now, that I will literally be walking on a sidewalk and I cannot step on the grass because I have Kate's thoughts and drilled in my mind of you can't cut a corner. And I think that's crazy, but it's so real. And I tell her this all the time, but that's the type of player that she just develops, and it's who you become on and off the field. And I think that's why you see it year after year, because it's really just this physical championship mindset where it's so much more than being able to have a backhand or a really great barrel control. It's just women who take full accountability for themselves through the good and the bad. And that's why you see so much success. But this year, it's really been a lot of teaching and breaking down the little things, teaching these players, this is who we are and this is how we play the game.
And, thinking of kind of their position with Northwestern, now you're looking at a situation, with all of these new stadiums, the new football field, the lakeside, football facility. Trying not to get lost in the shuffle is this brand new softball stadium that's coming together. I mean, talk about the strength of a program, and to be able to get the funding and the support for a new softball stadium amidst everything else that's going on campus. That's incredible.
Oh, I can't even explain the tears that I had when Kate showed me the plans and what it's going to mean to this program. First of all, it's going to help them a ton in recruiting. But besides that, the dedication from the university. This will be the first sole female facility built at Northwestern, and that speaks volumes. And that's something that doesn't come lightly. It's something that Kate Drohan takes with so much pride, along with the rest of the staff. And what basically they want it to resemble is everything that this program, really represents. That we're going to get this, flashy, how many $1 million stadiums, but it's also a way to celebrate the people who are very much a part of our family. And I think that's, when I look at the details, and I know a lot of them haven't been released, but the way that Kate is thinking about how do we keep this crowd very intimate, because that's the best part about playing at the J. As players, we always say it. The only reason why they have the longest active homestanding streak right now is because of the fans and how they show up and how we feel their support. So how can you create that now in this new stadium? And the way she's been able to be really unique and intentional, and the designs are going to absolutely reflect it. And then it's, what are the ways that we can, really embrace that we're Chicago. It's windy. It's cold. If you've been at the J, it's not pleasant at times. But how can we find a way where the players are comfortable, the fans are comfortable, and continue to elevate more people coming? And they're just very unique. And the biggest thing about their design that I think I'm super excited for, it is a 365-day stadium where these women are going to be able to use it every single day to help with their class studies, to have a great training room for Corey to being there, to have Melly, the equipment to be on staff there, to be able to have offices for the coaches. I mean, it's going to be a way to create this community where these athletes feel really supported with having to navigate studies, athletics, their bodies, so much fuel station. This is just going to provide them where it's going to take a little bit off their plate and just be able to help them manage it.
I know we want to talk about the J in a little bit in terms of its current iteration and the significance of this weekend and the games that are going to be played there. Before we get there, though, we wanted to talk about, only because, again, we consider you to be as much of an expert on this as literally anyone in the country. We talked earlier about, okay, Northwestern debuted in the poll at 23rd. Where do they sit? I mean, what is the overall landscape of softball look like in this particular year? Like, I mean, we're all familiar, I think even a casual fan knows Oklahoma's always good, etc. But if we look up at the top, what do you feel like is the landscape right now? Who are the top teams? How are conferences looking? And where do you think the Cats slot in?
The parity is at an all-time high. And I've talked to people throughout every single conference, and they could not agree more. And I think that's really great for our game. You have seen Oklahoma win 3 consecutive years. And for the first time, more than likely, they're going to go into the NCAA tournament and not be the number 1 seed on Selection Sunday. Texas will most likely be number 1. And at times at Supple America, we had Duke as number 1. So when people ask me, will Oklahoma, I say Oklahoma has great of a chance to win, as does everybody. And no one would be surprised if Oklahoma were to win again because of the talent that they have in every asset of the game. However, I think you're seeing there's teams who can compete with Oklahoma and can beat them, which is something that we haven't been able to say as confidently in the past. Texas is one of the best. Duke is one of the best. From there, it gets so interesting because you have Nigeri Kennedy at Stanford who could pitch against any lineup and beat them at any point. You have Washington with multiple arms, multiple different assets. You have Oklahoma State, who's one of the very best. Tennessee with what I believe is the best dual aces in the circle. Kiki Malloy leading them as Tennessee's new home run record leader. And the great thing about every team I'm saying is they're all in different conferences. And then you have the Big Ten, which I can say everyone always underestimates the Big Ten. And I think this is going to be another year. But because if you look at how all of the Big Ten teams performed before conference tournament, it does put them in a tough predicament where their RPI and their strength of schedule is not strong enough, where there's a really big argument to get multiple teams in. And from all the experts that I've talked to within these last months, and particularly in these last few weeks, Big Ten is looking at about getting 3 teams in. Now, obviously, I'd slot Northwestern, Michigan in that right away. I think the other 2 become a bubble of, depending on how this weekend goes, Indiana could get in, or if Northwestern tends to sweep this weekend, I would say Penn State has probably the best shot at getting in. I think you're going to see Big Ten right around 3 to 4 teams potentially in the tournament. And within that, I would say within the teams that I just named, potentially Nebraska could be on a bubble one, but it's hard with their RPI and strength of schedule. You are going to have, no matter what teams show up in the Big Ten, surprise a lot of people. And hosting might be a tough feat for them. I think Northwestern would have the best chance if they were able to hang on to this, win the regular season, and then win the tournament, at making an argument for being able to host the regional in Evanston. But whether it's Northwestern, whether it's Michigan, whether it's Penn State, whether it's Indiana, those are all programs, if anyone else makes it in the Big Ten as well, that I believe can shake up any landscape and any regional, because the Big Ten teams have really gotten a lot stronger and elevated their game in conference play. Most of them, like Northwestern, had a very new lineup and roster, and it's taken those few weeks to really understand who they were as a team. And I think you're seeing a lot of those teams play their best softball yet.
Something I've always kind of noticed and been fascinated by is, and I'm wondering, is there this inherent bias against like teams from the North, the Big Ten, who has to play pretty much the entire first half of their schedule on the road? I mean, you've got all of, like, you can't play softball in February in Evanston, in Ann Arbor, in Minnesota. Like, it's just, you can't do it. So you've got all of these road games happening early in a situation with Northwestern where you're turning over the lineup and everyone's getting to know each other and everyone's getting to learn how to play together, but doing it on the road. How much does the committee and the people, making the selections for the tournament take that into account? You say everything kind of came together once conference play started, and coincidentally, that's when they came back home. That's when they got home to the J, and you just mentioned the longest home winning streak in the country.
It's a great point you bring up, and I think with the committee, it's interesting every year what they've been able to share in terms of what they've looked at. You look at last year, they kind of threw everybody a curveball where they all of a sudden said that they looked at the amount of top 10 wins programs had. So it's very interesting. And every year the committee looks at it in a bit of a unique way. And I think that's the only part that can be a bit challenging for coaching staffs at the time, because as a coaching staff, you're trying to equip your team with your schedule, specifically in your non-conference, about how can I best set up the team that I have for being able to make a great case at the end of the year on Selection Sunday, because that's really what it's all about. Now, in terms of travel, I 100% agree with what you're saying. There is this extra level of commitment. I don't think they necessarily take that into consideration. I do think they take into consideration your strength of schedules. So all the Big Ten teams, they're putting themselves in situations pre-conference by going to West Coast, by going down south, trying to play those teams to be able to build up their resume of strength of schedule. What I do think is going to be really interesting, and I'm very excited for, is the expansion of the conference. I know it's a very hot debate about if people are excited, and if anyone's listening and maybe is feeling kind of wrong and icky about it, the biggest thing I would say is it's going to completely change softball opportunities, because you're going to be playing against a UCLA team who's been ranked the last how many years, a Washington team that's been ranked the last how many years, an Oregon team that's been ranked the last how many years. So this is just going to allow those ranked opportunities to now happen in conference, and you won't have to see so many Big Ten teams go all the way in pre-conference tournaments now, with knowing there's going to be extra opportunities within conference play.
On that front, I'm interested to hear your take. I mean, obviously with conference expansion has been, such a hot topic, and, it's like everyone knows that football is kind of what drives everything, because that's where all of the money is. And, the talk of, non-revenue sports like softball, or all of a sudden you got a team like Oregon who has to play a conference game in Maryland, in Rutgers, all of the travel. How much of an effect will that have on the Big Ten teams that are here now, and then the 4 incoming West Coast teams? How much will that really come into play?
I have changed my mind on this so many times. So if you hear me talking on both sides, it's because I have arguments on both sides. I would say the biggest thing is it won't impact the Midwest teams, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Illinois, the people who are all in the core, as much as it's going to affect the West Coast teams. You see it in the East Coast. If you were to talk to Maryland and Rutgers, they're so used to having to travel all the time, because unless they're playing each other every single weekend, that's not a home weekend, they're coming all the way to the Midwest. And that's what you're going to see, because while football is adding 4 West Coast teams, softball is only adding 3. And if you look at how Big Ten Conference is, you already don't play everybody. So you're going to see teams make it out to the West Coast 1, maybe at most 2 times. But it's going to be these West Coast teams who have never had to really leave their region much, because they're already playing in warm tournaments and pre-conference. So everyone's coming to them for the first time in their, program history. They're going to be the ones who are having to really travel to the Midwest. And that's going to be very different from them from a travel perspective, but also the conditions they have to play in. Nobody understands, besides Midwest people, what it's like to play alongside a Lakeville in March and it's freezing out. And, to see UCLA and to see Washington do that will be really interesting. I think the only part that I do worry about is the student athlete side, where it's a grind. Playing a softball season is very different than football. And I understand the physical aspect that the sport of football brings to the table. But at the end of the day, if we're talking just solely travel and commitment wise, you are leaving a day before, you're playing a football game that morning, and you're flying back that night. That works very differently in a women's softball space, where you're flying commercially. You're trying to find the best flight on Thursday. You're lucky if you can make your morning class on Thursday. You're then spending 7-8 hours, sometimes connecting a flight to get there, practicing that night, playing on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, probably flying out on the very last flight on Sunday, landing in O'Hare at 11:12, getting home at 1 a.m. to show up at class at 8 a.m. on Monday, because you stacked your Monday with classes because you're already leaving basically on Wednesday. So that's the part that I worry about, is are we taking really concern over what our student athletes are going through, and making sure that at the end of the day, their education and their mental health and emotional health is most important. But it does provide opportunities that I talked about in terms of more ranking opportunities for the conference as well, specifically in softball. The level of competition will be higher by adding those teams.
You do make a good point that in some ways, the incoming Pac-12 teams are carrying a lot of water. I mean, like, we're all certainly afraid of them. I think there's no like, it's literally 3 of the titans of the sport. But you're right, they're taking on a lot of burden in terms from a travel perspective. And the flip side may be that, right, like, I think we're always grousing about the fact that it seems like no Midwest cold weather team gets to ever host a regional unless the conditions are absolutely perfect from a scheduling standpoint and a resume standpoint, which doesn't serve the geography of the game well. It doesn't serve the game. Like, the game is better when there are regionals spread all over the country. And hopefully this will help that all come to pass. With all of that said, and with potentially a regional, whether Northwestern hosts it or not, potentially on deck here, there's a lot going on for Northwestern softball at this particular point in time. Obviously, we've got a titanic weekend on deck here. You're going to be broadcasting the Saturday game, but take us down the stretch here. What does Northwestern need to do? How do they do it? And what do you think their chances are relative to IU, who they're playing, but also Michigan, who's playing Ohio State at the same time?
I think both series are very unique, where on paper, because of the opponents that Northwestern and Michigan are facing, are having a bit of down years in the conference that I don't think people expected. Let's go back to the beginning of conference. Everyone was circling not only like Nebraska, but really Indiana, a team that was returning 90% of their lineup, made it to the Big Ten tournament championship game, lost in a 2-1 back and forth battle with Northwestern for the title, and then brought back, Brianna Copeland and all of their stud players. This was a team that everyone expected a ton from, and they came out, and it was a really difficult start to Big Ten for them. They were swept by Penn State. They were swept by Michigan. They just lost this previous weekend, the series, to Wisconsin. However, you see glimpses where they are the top-notch Indiana team that everyone expected them to be, where they can show a tremendous amount of power, a tremendous amount of fight in the seventh inning. They had a crazy walk-off the last few weekends. They've had a few. And then they also have multiple arms between Macy and Brianna Copeland in the circle. So this is a team that I really look at as a wild card for Northwestern, where if you look at Northwestern's Big Ten conference play, they've been very consistent in terms of their production, but also in terms of their lineup, in terms of who they're starting Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a team that you kind of know what to expect. They're well coached, well polished, 1 through 9. You've seen different players step up. And then I think you look at Indiana, where they have had an up and down season, but with that, they have the capability of performing at any moment. And I would say that's kind of similar to Michigan, who besides their trip to Evanston, they've been very perfect. And when I was talking to Kiki Thole today, she talked about this immense belief and hunger that came over this team since Evanston. So I think you're seeing Michigan playing their very best softball right now, but they're going up against an Ohio State who, like Indiana, people thought great things of them, and it's been a rocky Big Ten play. However, they have gotten huge wins where they got a win against Penn State. They got a win against Northwestern. So it's a team that can kind of get hot at random times as well. So that makes for really exciting matchups. I think what Northwestern needs to do is really continue to lean into their pitching. You have Ashley Miller, who has been multiple Big Ten Player of the Week. She carries a lot of the load. So it's going to come down to her going as long as she possibly can, and then the support she can get from the rest of the pitching staff. Cami Henry had one of her very best performances this past weekend, and that will be very key for her to be able to throw well for Northwestern again this upcoming weekend, and then also be able to be supported by Renee Cunningham and potentially other arms that could be available for them. But it's going to come down to their bats as well. They need to make sure that they're able to see a lot of different styles in terms of what Indiana can bring, and they have to be able to produce 1 through 9, but you've seen them do that. We talked about Kansas Robinson. There's nobody who can start a game with a home run the way that she can, and then to be able to follow up with 1 through 9 players who all have the power to do so, and also adding in the speed elements. So they're going to be a really exciting matchup. I'm ecstatic to watch. I think for looking at Northwestern and Indiana in particular, it's going to come down to whose arms are able to last longer, and then what teams are able to force the other pitcher out by being able to really just buy into a game plan, go all in on one speed or all in one side of the plate, and be able to rack up the arms for these pitchers. Because if anyone can knock the starter off on a Friday, it's going to make for a really, really interesting series Saturday and Sunday.
Well, it's for all the chips in the conference. Northwestern just needs to stay. For anybody who's not like following this religiously every weekend like we have been, Northwestern's got a half game lead over Michigan. We can talk about weird weather and things that happened last weekend in Lincoln, but basically if the Cats win as many or more games than Michigan this weekend, they win their 3rd consecutive Big Ten championship.
Which would be a tremendous accomplishment for them and for any program to be able to sustain, to be at the top for that long, especially with the turnovers and the new faces that have really developed for them. But as a softball lover, I'm excited. As a Northwestern alumni on Saturday, I'm very proud no matter whatever happens this weekend of just the team and the way that they have just bought in and continue to really make Northwestern very proud.
Speaking of proud alumni on Saturday, rough pivot here. not to put anything up against everything that softball and lacrosse have going on this weekend, but we are, and I know we're hoping to see you there, part of an effort organized by Northwestern alum Brad May to create this women's non-revenue sports weekend, which is centered around this tailgate at 9 a.m. in the West Lot, where we know we're expecting a bunch of people, but also hopefully a core softball crowd as well for this big tailgate ahead of the game that you are calling, Indiana, at 1 p.m., and then the Big Ten Women's Lacrosse Championship game out on the lake, which, furiously knocking wood, will include Northwestern lacrosse. But we know you have a busy day, but we're hoping to see you that morning. Is that in your plans in the West Lot?
Absolutely. You will see me. You will see Danielle Williams. You'll see Ashley Schultz, as many people as I can get there. Absolutely. And I hope who's ever listening can join, because I would love to see them there as well. And I think it's really special what you guys have created, a space for people supporting women's sports. And that's what makes Northwestern so special, is their ability to show up for the women who play there.
I got to tell you, when I told my daughter that you were going to be there, she got so excited. And she still has the ball that you gave her on our shelf here. So she's definitely excited to see you again.
Oh,
the ball that she asked you for.
I love it. She knew what she wanted.
She did. She absolutely did.
Get her already. Well, I could not wait to see her there. That'll be really, really special.
Oh, well, Sydney, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on with us tonight. Always a pleasure. Very much appreciated. And, we can't wait to see you on Saturday. And, best of luck with everything you got going on. Again, we could sit here and talk about it all night. But in a nutshell, where could people find you and where could people follow you?
Yes. So all my social media handles are Sydney, SYDNEY _Supple, SUPPLE. You can find me on X, Instagram, starting to put more interviews on TikTok, but please follow me there. My podcast is From the Players. It has its own Instagram that's in my personal bio. And then anything on Softball America, I am helping create all of the content there, and would just love to continue to grow the game and bring you guys more amazing softball stories, because that's what I love to do. And I think you'll be blown away by the women who play this game.
Absolutely. And we always are. So thank you again. And we'll see you on Saturday.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. Have a great night.
Have you ever thought about building a Westlot Pirates-like community for your business? If so, we've got your solution. Teamworks Media, a brand marketing and content company, is here to help you tell your brand story better. Better yet, you can work directly with the founder, Jay Sharman, known on this podcast as Like the Posts. The same expertise he's brought to brands like ESPN, the Big Ten Conference, and Northwestern University are now available to you in an affordable way, directly with this Wildcat superfan. Contact Jay directly at 312-446-9435 or jay@teamworksmedia.com to learn how to elevate your brand story. Once again, Sydney Supple, thank you so much for jumping on with us tonight. Just incredible stuff. And like the way she's just taken the bull by the horns and really made, the softball world take notice, take heed, and the way she's just pulling everyone with her to increase the game and just make it even more accessible and able for anyone to jump in and grow.
She's someone who she is so attuned to the analytics of the game and the way the game is played and the way the game works, right? As this brilliant former player, she has all of those things. but she has tapped into this level of heart and emotion within the game that you see in these interviews that she does, that is going to grow the game. And Scuzz, you alluded to it, when we were talking with her, but the amount of things that she has done over the past year will be eclipsed only by the amount of things that she is about to do. I think the next 5-10 years you're going to see from Sydney Supple, and the impact it's going to have on softball are going to be absolutely tremendous.
So real quick, mentioning a few other things going on. A few other things. There's a lot going on from Big Ten championships and NCAA appearances. Let's start with lacrosse. We talked last time about the big regular season win at Michigan, clinching the regular season championship and the number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament, and that all-important first-round bye. The Cats will be taking on Johns Hopkins on Thursday, and some big news already in the beginning of the Big Ten tournament.
This lax tourney decided to get real drunk real quick, and it's I don't know, like, you have Maryland and Michigan have been eliminated already, and on one hand, now the Cats are playing Johns Hopkins, a team they beat by 5 goals, who is, I think, the 5 seed in this tournament. But, I mean, lordy, what does Shutdown Fullcast call it? The letdown look ahead? It's obviously, we know the pedigree of Northwestern. There's no way they're overlooking anyone on the schedule. That's what champions don't overlook anyone. That's why they're champions. But we were expecting to have, a potential top 4 team in the country in this matchup, right? Or close to it. And now not only do we have that, do we have Johns Hopkins, but on the other side of the bracket, Rutgers pulled off an upset too, which has the effect of very likely clearing the deck for Penn State to make the final also, which means both Northwestern and Penn State are already staring at that rematch of Northwestern's only conference loss. And that would be Saturday. That would be the championship game. So it's a heck of a lot to have potentially on the horizon suddenly, with such a massive game on Thursday against Johns Hopkins on tap first.
I wouldn't rubber stamp anything.
No, absolutely not.
Penn State beat Rutgers by 1 goal back in early March. So I think that game is going to be full tilt as well. And it's interesting. Sydney mentioned this with softball and just the level of parity, and I think we're seeing that in lacrosse. Frankly, we've been talking about that for 15 years as we've watched Kelly Monty-Hiller build her program at Northwestern. But to see, the rise of Michigan, coached by former Northwestern player Hannah Nielsen, to see programs like Colorado and USC rise up, and the proliferation of strong lacrosse programs, not just outside of the Eastern time zone, but off the Eastern seaboard, is palpable. And you're seeing, a really, really stacked Big Ten at this stage. And certainly Northwestern, has been on the top of the mountain almost all season, but they're going to have their hands full this weekend, and we can't wait to be there for it.
We should mention too, right? Like, credit where credit is due. This team took 2 really tough losses against Notre Dame and against Penn State, but both of those were on the road. And we've seen how Northwestern plays out on the lake. It is a great gift to be able to host this tournament this year and have that as a feather in this team's cap, in addition to this unbelievable wealth of talent that we have on this amazing lacrosse team. But this is a team that went to Johns Hopkins and handled their business against Johns Hopkins. A very good team. But I think the Cats obviously will have that edge to be able to host here. But this is a really good team. And again, like, as Gus said, that's the flip side. You can easily argue Hopkins and Rutgers have never played better this season than they're playing right now. And, catching a team hot like that is never a good thing. But the flip side is no more Michigan in this tournament, no more Maryland in this tournament. And, if the Cats play the way we know they can play, the deck is cleared for them.
Some other spring sports that we should mention, one of them being spring football. spring football practice wrapped up. We mentioned this on our live draft show with the Win Cures Everything boys, but probably the biggest news to come out of spring practice was immediately following. Brandon Sullivan put his name in the transfer portal and is on his way out of town.
Yeah, it's definitely big news. I think even amongst the three of us, our mileage on how big it is and how impactful it is varies. Yeah. I think the truth though is that until we see what comes back from the transfer portal, it's very hard to evaluate what this is. Beyond the fact that, and I think there's a fantastic interview that Matthew Shelton did with David Braun, talking about many things across the Northwestern program, but they spoke about Sullivan specifically, and it's pretty clear that Braun and the staff were transparent with Sullivan about where they saw him and how they saw him playing, and were transparent with him that they were going to continue to try to bring in veteran signal callers through the transfer portal, and understood if he wanted to go elsewhere and focus on trying to become a starter somewhere else. And that I think reading the tea leaves, that's what we all believe is happening. But trying to analyze this or understand what it means for the team or for the fall or et cetera is just hard to do at this stage without knowing the other side of the equation.
Right. And, it's like if there was another shoe that has been put in place to drop already, we don't know that, and we would never find out about that ahead of time, right? It's worth noting that almost exactly within 3 days of almost exactly one calendar year ago, Ben Bryant committed to Northwestern and transferred, right? So it's quite possible, in fact, I think I would bet heavily on it that by the next podcast that we record, there's maybe something happening. Now, the question is,
or honestly, given our luck, but the time we push stop till when I actually am able to get this thing edited and posted.
Right, exactly. So we're, and then the situation, did Sullivan have like a clear understanding of someone coming in, or was it, just as Scuzz was saying, like just this is the lay of the land. Like we're probably going to bring someone in, you're going to have to compete, etc. If you watch the draft podcast, that we heavily talked about Mike Wright or alluded to Mike Wright simply because there are so many reasons it makes sense. He chose between Vanderbilt and Northwestern coming out of high school. He's a grad transfer. Obviously, the academic fit is there, and he has a lot of quality starts under his belt in the SEC. So that one would certainly make a lot of sense. We do know as of today, one massive piece of news that I think a lot of people expected, but it's still worth mentioning. Mark Gronowski is staying at South Dakota State. This is the two-time FCS Player of the Year quarterback who was Zach Lujan's quarterback at South Dakota State. He would have been a marquee transfer to any school had he decided to transfer, but hey, credit to him. He's staying and continuing to captain the dynasty that he helped build at South Dakota State, and he's going to stay there one more year. So good on him. But it's not going to be Mark Gronowski. We'll see if it's Mike Wright. We'll see if it's somebody else. But we expect shoes to drop here. We're just waiting.
Other spring sports to mention, we haven't spent a lot of time talking golf. We probably should have, but Northwestern, both men's and women's golf, now have the coaches of the year. David Inglis for the men and Emily Fletcher for the women, both named the Big Ten Coaches of the Year. John, you made a pretty fun point on Twitter. Can we list all of the Big Ten Coaches of the Year for Northwestern who are either reigning or Coach of the Year within the past couple years?
I was going to say, right, let's say 3 years, right? That would give us Kate Drohan. It would give us Tracy Fuchs. It would give us David Braun. It would give us Chris Collins. It would give you both of the coaches we've just mentioned. I don't know if that's hit at all, but that's probably a lot of coaches not. Didn't
the cross country coach get some love last year? I might be making that up, but
it's possible. The point is, it's a lot of sports, and it's like
Kelly
whatever you want.
Hiller?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not mention?
I don't think you mentioned.
He didn't mention the GOAT.
Did I not mention the GOAT who put Bill Belichick to shame out on the lake? by stacking more rings than him.
Wouldn't that be great if he showed up and all of his rings and Kelly was like, I have too many?
Yeah, Kelly Monty Hiller, who, including her playing rings, has a ring for every finger on both hands. So, yes, it's so many. And the crazy thing is, as we've said before, it's like, however you want to slice it, right? Like, that includes football and basketball, and then all of these non-revenue sports. So, yeah, I mean, what a collection of coaches this school has right now. It's truly incredible.
Both men's and women's golf playing in the Big Ten, in the NCAA tournaments. Also playing in the NCAA tournament is women's tennis. For the 24th time in 25 seasons, they will be going out to Pepperdine to play Arizona State in the first round of the NCAA championships, with Pepperdine and SIUE rounding out the regional. Then the super regionals and then the NCAA championships will be in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Just, spring sports. And I know we haven't given, as much airtime to the rest of the spring sports beyond softball and lacrosse, but, you've got two national powers in there, but also, I mean, the rest of the roster. I mean, everyone has been playing really, really well this spring, and it's very, very exciting to see, and great time to be wearing purple.
And hey, if you want to talk up any of these particular sports or give shine to any of these particular athletes, find us in the West Lot of Ryan Field this Saturday and tell us all about it, because that's what this is. It's going to be a celebration. And like women's golf, women's tennis, we're talking about women's non-revenue sports and how amazing that they've been. So add them to the list, and please find us. And if you're a parent, if you're a fan of these sports, if you know these teams, if you're a student journalist who covers these teams, come tell us all about it. We are stoked to be a part of it.
Anything else to mention before we get out of here tonight, guys?
Scuzz, we should circle back because you mentioned it last week, or you mentioned it the week before the draft pod, but we should hit the Izzy Skane numbers as they pertain to this weekend one more time.
352 career goals. That would be 6 to match the NCAA career goal record, 7 to break.
And look, we're not trying to set any jinx here, so I'm not going to mention any specific things, but she needs 6 to tie, 7 to break. The Cats play Thursday, and if they win, they play Saturday. You're all smart. You can all do the math here and figure out where this is headed.
So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it there for tonight. Head to our website, westlotpirates.com, where you can leave comments and questions. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now YouTube, where you should share, like, and subscribe. And you can always email the show, westlotpirates@gmail.com. Tune in next time as we give our visceral and statistical views on Northwestern athletics, and look for us in the West Lot of Ryan Field this weekend. West Lot of Ryan Field. We will be waving the red pirate flag, because we give no quarter, especially the fourth. For John Lacombe and Eric Skazbo, I'm Sam Walter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.